起来吧，祖国英勇的孩子们，斗争的时候来到了。我们
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we are going to be looking at an odd one with the Cataphract, one where I had to dig into the intro bucket to find something that would fit because, well, even though it was originally designed for Liao, Davion was the primary operator for the design for the longest time. Well, at least in terms of how many they built. We do have quite a few Cataphracts around here because, well, the Fed Suns didn't really care who they were selling the licenses to build those things to, and Earthworks had very little to say about it. So the Aurigan Trade Alliance managed to get their hands on the plans of the Cataphract, and we started building them in the late 3040s. And we've been revising them and modifying them and bringing them up to our standard ever since. It's a fairly popular mech in our region of space, so between House Liao, House Davion, and House Serrano, we have quite a few of them. But if you go anywhere else, the Draconis Combine has a few, but just because they stole them. The Lyran Commonwealth never bought the plans for them or never built them in any capacity and didn't buy them while they were allied with the Federated Suns. House Merrick just doesn't care for the Cataphract. They've got their Orions that do the same kind of job at a price that they're able to pay. So it is a machine that is very regional. You might not be a huge fan of it or you might not be a huge knower of it, but we'll get into it and we'll look at this particular design and what makes it a very decent mech, in my opinion. The history of the Cataphract starts with the Fourth Succession War. Well, just before the Fourth Succession War, to be more precise. The Capellan Confederation at the time was not in a very good shape because, well, there were quite a few different reasons, but they were getting beat up pretty badly by just about everyone. On paper, the biggest mech that they were producing locally was the Vindicator. If you start digging into it, you're going to start seeing all sorts of oddities, and there's some mechs that are coming out of various factories with serial numbers that don't match. Of course, there's different things going on during that time, but on paper, for the majority of the military, the Vindicator was basically the biggest thing they could get. They were able to buy some weapons from House Kurita and from the Free Worlds League because of their alliance with the Treaty of Captain, but it wasn't a very good deal for them because they were basically being fleeced by everyone. They were trying to get back into production of new designs or rebuilding something to reinforce their military, so the CCAF started looking at the local corporations they had in order to propose some new designs. The first things that came out were actually the Ravens from Ellis-Bont Mechworks, which included 7.5 tons of electronic warfare equipment because they thought it would be very useful. This particular version was not very popular. One of the biggest problems was that the CCAF needed something bigger than the Vindicator, not something smaller than it, because they were going to be facing Warhammers, Archers, and Marauders from the AFFS. The Raven did stick around, and the 2X and 4X models were popular enough until the Helm Memory Core managed to bring that electronic warfare into a better package with the 3L, which entered production in 3048. Earthworks is a trusted name in Battletech productions. They build just about everything, ranging from the Flea all the way to the Treburana. They build Phoenix, Ox, Archers, longbows, you name it. They've got various factories for them. They do have a massive factory on Tikhonov, actually, the industrial center of the Coreward Capellan Confederation. At the time, it was mainly producing spare parts and repairing salvaged mech and making sure that the CCAF was able to fight other people. When the contracts came out for production of a new machine, the local leadership jumped on the opportunity and started to work on a 70-tonner machine. Designing a brand new mech was really not something that was common or easy in the late Third Succession War, especially in a starved state like the Capellan Confederation. Comstar did stop killing all sorts of people at the time. They were mostly focusing on killing people in the Federated Suns and the Lyran Commonwealth during that era. So people in the Capellan Confederation could possibly work and design new things. The people at Works managed to scrape things together by grabbing parts from Marauders, Shadowhawks, and Phoenix Hawks that they were building locally and mashing them together into a thing that was sort of a Frankenmech, but not quite. Those early Cataphracts, of which we have an example here, do show the amalgamation of those different mechs together until it had a more stable chassis later on. Your first prototype Cataphract was the CTF-0X, and it came out in 3025 with all sorts of bells and whistles. And by that, I mean an electronic warfare equipment suite that was probably being sold by someone that was quite well connected with the Capellan government. This one is using a clearly licensed GM280 to go up to 65 kilometers per hour, and you have 11 tons of standard plates on a standard chassis. This was basically the best you could get at the time, and 11 tons of plates on a 70-ton mech is quite reasonable. As I said here, the centerpiece of the whole thing was an electronic warfare equipment suite and a remote sensor dispenser, which was really going to be super useful when you were going to get steamrolled by a bunch of Warhammer Ds and Marauder Ds and all sorts of funny stuff from the AFFS. For weapons, it had a PPC and a 5-class autocannon, along with 2 medium lasers and 14 heat sinks to try to keep the heat down. It was already a decent enough setup, but it probably needed a lot of refinement before it faced an actual military. The CCAF saw the potential in the design, but they realized that all that EWAR equipment probably wouldn't save the Confederation from an hungry fox. Earthworks switched things around and proposed the CTF-1X with this new body kit. It still has a lot of parts taken from other things, but it's a physical chassis that is independent from anything else. And this one really behaves more like a heavy troopers in the same line as your Thunderbolt. You still have 11 tons of plates, but you got 2 medium lasers in the back of the design in order to protect you from things going behind you, like a lot of light mechs like Valkyries and Javelins that the people in the AFFS like using in large amounts. And you upgrade the 5-class autocannon for a 10-class autocannon to give you a lot more bite. A lot of people flip the lasers forward. That's a more or less standard upgrade, but let's leave it at that. You have 16 heat sinks to compensate for the heat from the extra weapons, either the lasers or the little bit more heat that the 10-class autocannon generates compared to a 5-class. But with 16 heat sinks, you can probably shoot at PPCs, those medium lasers that are still in the arm, run around, and you'll just eat just a tiny bit, then cool down a little bit and shoot that AC-10. It balances things out fairly quickly. Earthworks and the CCAF weren't 100% sure of what they wanted to do with the Cataphract, so they thought the 1X was going to serve them well enough, but they still practiced with new designs as well. They tried to make it a little bit tougher with the 2X, which increases the armor to 13 tons, which is a whole lot on a 70-ton mech of the era. The PPC is replaced with a large laser, while a 4-tube SRM is also added in the other arm in order to increase your tank hunting capabilities. The torso lasers on this one also point forward rather than backwards, so it is more of a brawler. It is quite decent. I'm not sure which one would have won the day if things hadn't taken a turn quite soon after. Things took quite a turn at the beginning of the Fourth Succession War, as the armed forces of the Federated Suns basically brought the entire Crucis Lancers, 8 regimental teams with mercenary support, with everything that they needed to take Tikhonov. This was basically the biggest prize for the Federated Suns during the Fourth Succession War, even though they cut an entire portion of the Capellan Confederation out. There is a popular Trio game that showcases this particular event in a limited manner. I mean, it's not going to show you just how brutal dropping 8 full regimental team is on a planet. But if you play Legends of Kestrel Lancers, It'll be a fun romp. It's not the best game out there, but it's far from the worst one either. And whenever I play it, I find it quite enjoyable. And it does feature one of Flanagan's old partner in crime with the Mason's Marauders. Having captured a factory and being more than happy to buy new mechs, the AFFS asked Earthworks to keep making their Cataphracts and even make some for themselves. The CTF-4X is an experiment done by Aus Davion. It's not a successful one, but it's an experiment and shows what you could potentially do with a Cataphract. The problem is when you have a variety of other 70-ton mechs already in the wing, you need to find a reason to build a new one and keep it in production. This one keeps the large laser from the 2X, but replaces all the other weapons with a pair of 5-class autocannon and a 5-rack LRM. With 4 tons of reload, specialty ammo is really going to make this particular design interesting, but it's not going to perform amazingly well. On top of all of that, because autocannons are quite large, you need to downgrade the engine to a General Motor 210 rather than a 280, giving you only a top speed of 54 kilometers per hour. Like I said, it's an experiment. It's not a successful one. I don't think this particular model really should be on the field very often. From that point onwards, I would say the 1X and the 2X were the most produced one, until the recovery of the Helm's Memory Core and the new Dallas Memory Core being fully decrypted. Is basically the 1X that was sold to the Aurigan, well, at the time was the Aurigan Coalition. Now it's the Aurigan Trade Alliance, and that's the one that we had in production in the 3040s. The official Earthworks upgrade for the Cataphract using new technology came out as the CTF-3D, which some people say is a mistake. This one adds 4 jump jets to make it more mobile, which makes it different from the other trooper-ish kind of 70 tons. The main gun is now a Midron XL LB10X, which is very good, but rather than an ER PPC or just a standard PPC, the other gun is replaced with a General Motors Nova 5 Ultra 5 class autocannon. This is where a lot of people have problems. It's not a whole lot of punch, it requires ammo, it's a bit odd. There's a medium razor on the opposite arm, and you have 2 that covered the back, but most of them are going to be flipped forward. Anyways, you still have 11 tons of plate. You've got 16 double heat sinks, which are more than enough to compensate for the weapons that you do have on the design, and it'll stay in the field fairly long, even though it now has an XL engine. ECCAF wanted their toy back, so they commissioned Earthworks to build a new factory on Grand Base, where they started building all sorts of fancy things. The CTF-3L uses a mask to boost its ground speed instead of jump jets to make it more mobile. It goes closer to the 1X for its weapons, but it uses double heat sinks to make sure that you're able to shoot everything. Your main gun is an ERPPC backed by that Midron XL LB10X autocannon, which means you're very, very good at medium range engagement and you are able to do some sniping. The lasers are replaced with medium pulse lasers with 1 in each arm and a pair facing backwards. It'll be a very nice infighter once you get there. In order to fit everything in, well, it does need to put an XL engine in, making it a little bit more fragile. The next model comes down to the CCAF retaking Tikhonov and doing a full revamp on the thing. The CTF-4L uses a skeleton made of endo steel, while the armor is 13.5 tons of stealth armor plates with its associated Guardian ECM. For weapons, you are equipped with a Gauss rifle backed by a Series Arms Warrior ERPPC. You get 2 ER medium lasers to close the deal. 13 double heat sinks will make an active presence to try to keep you cool while you have a stealth system on and trying to shoot an ERPPC. It's not the best for that, but it's going to be able to get where it needs to be and then turn off the stealth armor and shoot everything. It's also quite close to the Caesar, which is a revamp of the design as well, made by our friends in the AFFS. The CTF-3L was quite popular with the CCAF, and Earthworks decided to give them an upgrade kit in 3068 with the CTF-3LL. Going back to a standard chassis compared to the previous one, you also have an XL engine, meaning that it's a little bit more fragile. But now the front-facing lasers are going to be ER medium lasers to give you more range. The big change, though, is that the RPPC is replaced with the brand new plasma rifle, which was fed by 3 tons of shooting foam. This is a fairly solid setup, especially when the rear-facing medium pulse lasers are flipped forward. I think it's going to be quite a surprise, especially in that particular era, to see someone show up with a plasma rifle. On their end, Davion still had the plans for the Cataphract, and they intended to keep using them. In 3070, they released the CTF-5D, which used a Defiance-inspired light engine, Capellan-inspired stealth armor, and a Word of Blake-inspired small cockpit. Basically, they stole everything from everyone and decided to patch it into a mech that they stole to begin with. This one has 6 improved jump jets to let it bounce 180 meters while shooting its plasma rifle and a light AC-5. To round things up, you also have a pair of ER medium lasers. I don't think it's the best design out there, and I don't think it's the worst one either. It's functional for what it is meant to do, but it's not going to replace things like a Warhammer or an Archer or any of the more common 70-ton mech. It does a special thing, and it's a special particular branch of the military, and it's a bit interesting in that role. Nobody really touched the Cataphract for a little while, and Earthworks just started releasing a new version in 3132 with the CTF-5L. The body is now covered in laser reflective plate on top of an endosteel chassis, and you have an XL gyro attached to a standard engine in order to save a little bit more weight. The main weapons are comparable to your 4L with a Gauss rifle and an ERPPC, while you have 2 medium lasers that are normally mounted backwards. Once again, they're going to be flipped forward about 95% of the time. To support things at a closer range, the other lasers were replaced with small variable speed pulse lasers for some reason. It does appear that I'm not the only one that was not impressed by small variable speed pulse lasers, and 2 years later, the CTF-5LL started walking off production lines. The small VSPs are replaced with regular medium lasers, giving you a little bit more range and a little bit more bite. The other big change is the addition of 4 jump jets, giving you a jump range of 120 meters. This one is perfectly functional and is going to work really well as a medium heavy trooper, or to say something like that, but it fits a particular role that no other 70-ton mech really fits, outside of maybe a grasshopper. So what can Flanagan and the Oregon Trade Alliance do for you? Well, we do build Omni Cataphracts around here, but those are for exclusive use for the Rimward Alliance and our friends. But if you do have regular Cataphracts floating around, or if you want to buy regular Cataphracts that we're still building, well, we have a CTF-1F that's available. It takes your basic 1X, because that's the one that we were building to begin with, and we decided to supercharge it with new technology. The armor is now 10.5 tons of ferrofibrous plates, obviously, with case protection for the ammo. It's cooled by 16 double heat sinks because the weapons are going to be a little bit heat intensive with an ERPPC, an LB-10X from Midron XL, and 4 medium lasers. We have a 1F for a 2F. It's not really a big thing here, but they're upgraded to ER medium lasers once those become fairly available around here as well. So you have a fairly solid trooper. It's not going to be the fastest thing around, but it's going to be able to stick around quite some time. And if you're wondering about the Omni Cataphract, well, it's not a state secret anymore because people have been meeting them on the battlefield nowadays for a little while. We've been building those for about half a century, maybe a little bit more, and it was generally used by people internally in the Oregon Trade Alliance through our land lease program, and it was built using our own experience we acquired by acquiring other people, and just buying things off all sorts of people. The version that's available nowadays is fairly fancy. You've got clan-grade ferrofibrous and clan-grade heat sinks on them, but we've mostly been using standard-grade equipment on it when providing it to regular partners. The Cataphract never reached full acceptation by anyone. The AFFS used it to design things like the Caesar. The CCAF considered it tainted because it was in service for the Federated Suns for so long. I mean, we're probably the only people in the inner sphere or the larger inner sphere to really just be like, yeah, we're going to take a 70-ton mech that is fairly reliable, and fairly well armored here in the Aurigan Trade Alliance. It's a successful trooper in its own right, and it's going to be seeing a lot of service in the front line and the second line units ever since the 3030s. If you're looking for a half-decent trooper and you don't have a Thunderbolt laying around, it will probably fill the role pretty well. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.